Hi everyone, welcome back to Liberty Park Music. Today we'll be learning about intervals, which are the incremental building blocks of how melodies are constructed. As its name implies, an interval is the distance between two notes. The smallest interval in Western music is the half step, which is 1 fret on the guitar. While we could name our intervals using numbers of steps they contain, it's a lot easier to identify intervals using their proper names. There are two parts to the name of an interval, and they are the quantity and the quality. The quantity is a number based on the scale degrees of the major scale. So let's take a look at C major scale, written in standard notation. Beginning on our root note of C, a C note to another C note, which is the exact same note, is known as a unison interval. A C note to a D note is known as a second interval. A C note to an E note is a third interval. A C note to an F note is a fourth interval, and so on and so forth as you go higher and higher up the scale. Once we get to the C note an octave above, the interval is known as the octave interval. The intervals within the first octave of the scale are called simple intervals, and once we go beyond the octave, we call those intervals compound intervals. A simple way to figure out what number interval a compound interval should be is by adding 7 to its simple interval counterpart. So for example, this C to this D over here is more than an octave apart, making it a compound interval. To figure out what number interval this is, take the lower interval D note, take the interval to the lower D note over here, which is the second interval, and add 7, which is 9. So we've now figured out that the compound interval to this D note is a 9th interval. There are two types of intervals, melodic and harmonic intervals. Melodic intervals are two notes played separately, while harmonic intervals are two notes played at the same time. Melodic intervals are either ascending or descending, and when counting the interval of descending notes, you still count the interval from the lower note. For example, this C going up to this E is an ascending third interval. But if we have the same E descending down to a C instead, that interval is still a third interval as we count the distance from the lower note. It's just that it is now a descending third interval. So we've covered how to name the quantity names of intervals, so now let's cover the quality names. The qualitative names of intervals are based on the major scale, and changing the qualitative names will add or reduce 1 or 2 half steps from the interval. For example, C to E and C to E flat are both thirds, but they are obviously different notes and obviously will have different intervals. Now looking back to the C major scale, here are all the qualitative names of the different scale degrees. The unison, the fourth, the fifth, and the octave are perfect intervals, while the second, third, sixth, and seventh intervals are major intervals. And this applies to their compound intervals counterparts as well. And that's all for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and again, if you have any questions about any of the previous sections, please just feel free to reach out to us, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Anyways, I hope to see you in the next lesson.